Imagine this. You're sitting in a cafe just watching people, not judging, just noticing patterns. And someone walks in dressed in expensive clothes, visible logos, polished appearance. Everything about him signals success. While a few minutes later, another person walks in looking completely ordinary. No brands, no signals, almost invisible. And yet, if you could see their bank accounts, there's a strong chance the second person is actually wealthier. And that realization feels strange because everything we've been taught says wealth should be visible. It should announce itself. It should look like something. But in reality, the signal and the truth are often disconnected. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere, not as a coincidence, but as a pattern, where people who look expensive often carry pressure, while people who look simple often carry freedom. And that difference is not just financial, it's psychological, because looking rich and being rich come from completely different mindsets. One is about signaling, the other is about building, and those two paths eventually move in opposite directions. Because to look expensive, you have to constantly maintain an image, upgrade, replace, stay relevant, and it feels normal, like participation in society. But what you don't see is the hidden cost, not just money, but attention and pressure. Because once you create an image, you have to maintain it, while the people who quietly build wealth step out of that loop, not loudly, but through small, consistent decisions. They stop optimizing for appearance and start optimizing for function. And that shift is almost invisible, but incredibly powerful. Around this point, if you're starting to realize how much of modern spending is driven by perception, you're on Andrew Finance, where we break down the deeper psychology behind money and behavior. So take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because what comes next will change how you see wealth completely. Because when you zoom out, you realize rich people often look boring, not because they lack taste, but because they've stopped using money to signal identity. Their validation doesn't come from how others see them, so their spending becomes selective, intentional, and detached from identity. While the desire to look expensive often comes from the need to signal stability or progress, which is understandable in a world built on quick judgments, but it comes with a cost, because when money is used for signaling, it stops being available for building, and over time that direction matters more than the amount. As this continues, the gap between appearance and reality slowly widens, not instantly, but over time. The person focused on looking expensive builds a lifestyle that requires constant input, constant spending, constant maintenance, and that lifestyle becomes dependent on continuous income, while the person who looks simple is quietly building assets, margin, and flexibility, things that are not visible but deeply powerful. And because these things grow silently, they are often ignored, but they change everything. Because when your life is supported by assets instead of appearance, your decisions become different. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't need to prove anything. And that creates a level of freedom that is hard to see, but easy to feel. And this is where psychology plays its strongest role, because humans are wired to respond to visible signals.
We compare based on what we see. And because of that, we overestimate those who signal wealth and underestimate those who don't. And this misperception quietly shapes behavior. You see someone living a certain lifestyle, and your expectations shift. Your spending adjusts. Your definition of normal changes. And without realizing it, you start moving in that same direction, not because it's effective, but because it's visible. While the people who build wealth quietly resist that pull, not perfectly, but consistently enough. They understand that visibility is not value, and over time, that understanding compounds into something stable. They prioritize durability over novelty, function over appearance, long-term stability over short-term validation. And while these choices don't create immediate recognition, they create something far more important: independence. Because real wealth doesn't need to be displayed to exist. Eventually, you reach a point where the difference becomes clear, not in a dramatic way, but as a quiet realization. One path leads to constant maintenance, while the other leads to gradual independence, and this is the core truth. Looking rich is a performance, while being rich is a structure. One requires constant effort, while the other creates internal support. And the reason rich people often look boring is because they've optimized for structure, not performance. They've removed unnecessary signals and unnecessary spending, not to appear minimal, but to remain flexible. Because flexibility is one of the most valuable forms of wealth. The ability to say no, to pause, to change direction without everything collapsing. And that ability doesn't come from appearance, it comes from building something that doesn't depend on constant validation. And this leads to the final shift. The goal is not to look rich, the goal is to reach a point where looking rich no longer matters. Because once you stop using money to signal, you start using it to build. And that changes everything. Your spending becomes intentional, your priorities become clear. Your life becomes less about maintaining an image and more about creating stability. And in that shift, you stop chasing attention and start gaining control. If this video made you rethink the difference between looking wealthy and actually building wealth, then you're already ahead of most people. This is Prime Gorilla, where we go beyond surface-level success and explore the deeper systems shaping your financial life. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the smartest financial move isn't what you show, it's what you quietly keep.